Hi there, Sandra here from the Schwowin's Nest. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I am making 5 super cute DIYs for you. This first one is using a leftover piece of sign from the Dollar Tree. I'm just marking out how steep I want my roof peak to be, and then I'm going to cut it out using my utility knife. This material is pretty easy to cut. You just need a really sharp blade on your utility knife, a ruler to help you get a straight line, and then you can just score it multiple times. You can stop partway through and snap it off, or you can do what I'm doing and just go all the way through to the bottom. I'm using a couple of these tumbling tower blocks to start off the base of the birdhouse, and these are the larger ones that I picked up at Walmart in the actual tumbling tower full game. But you could also just use whatever you have on hand. If you've got the smaller blocks from the Dollar Tree, that would work perfectly as well. Using 4 more of these blocks, I'm going to glue them together to form a square behind the front of the birdhouse. To make the hole for the birdhouse, I'm just tracing out a circle using this little bottle of glue that was on my craft table, and then I'm going to use my utility knife to cut it out. The easiest way for me to cut out this circle is just to score an X in the middle of the circle. Then I'll do a square around the X, and then that will pop out these little triangle pieces, and then I can very easily just clean up the rest of the edges. Using coarse grit sandpaper, I just am going to go around the inside of the hole, make sure that it's nice and smooth. I cut out some more pieces to form the sides of the box. I'm just going to use hot glue to glue them right down onto the blocks. I also cut a piece out for the bottom, and I made sure that it fit in there really nice and snug. I'm going to add some hot glue and then just pop that in. You could leave the birdhouse like this if you wanted, but I wanted to add a little roof peak. I have square dowels that came in a pack from Dollarama, and they're really soft wood, so they're super easy to cut with my miter shears. Again, using some hot glue, I'm just going to glue the 2 pieces of wood right on top of the peak, making sure that I have a little bit overhanging on each side. I'm going to give it a couple of coats of white paint. I totally forgot about the little dowel that the birds need to sit on the birdhouse. So I've just got this little 1/4 inch dowel. I'm also going to use my miter shears to just cut a little piece off and then hot glue it right underneath the hole. And of course, it also needs a little bit of white paint to match in with the birdhouse. For a sweet little finishing touch, I decided to use this jute ribbon that has these adorable little green leaves attached and just hot glue it right around the top part of the box just to camouflage those seams and that it's not real wood. I did do some dry brushing with some black paint and a chippy brush. Unfortunately, I forgot to turn my camera on for that, but I think I do some dry brushing a little bit later on in the video, so you'll see me do it then. I am so honored to be part of the Friend Friday Hop this week. We are doing it on Saturday. We had a few technical glitches, but we are ready to go. The Hop is all about collabing with friends and bringing you some wonderful creations. We are doing a spring edition today. The Friend Friday Hop is hosted by Heidi Sonbul DIY. If you haven't seen Heidi's channel yet, you are missing out. Go over, there's a link in my description box, hit that subscribe button and the notification bells because you're not going to want to miss out on any of her videos. This was just a little Christmas sign that I had sitting on one of my shelves. I'm going to update it first by giving the back of it a coat of Americana gel stain. It was hanging on the wall before, but now what I'm going to do with it today is going to show the back, so I want to make sure it looks good. I always apply the stain with a brush and then I take a little soft cloth and just wipe it off so I don't have too much of the excess sitting on there. Once the stain was dry, I just used a small brush and gave the inside a couple of coats of white. I wanted to make sure that you couldn't see any of that black showing through. I'm going to take the same white paint and I'm going to give this candlestick a couple of coats. Now, it didn't turn out really well because of the black that was painted on it. You could see a lot of streaks. So I ended up taking some white flat enamel spray paint, and the last coat was a coat of spray paint, and that just evened everything out really nicely. The next thing I'm going to do once it's dry is use this bare antique wax. It's a dark brown color, and I'm just using a soft cloth, grabbing some of the wax and then just putting it all over. I just want it to look a little bit aged and old and not quite so brand new. So my idea is to put the frame on top of the candlestick, but the candlestick is round, the frame is square. So I'm using two of these medium-sized tower blocks. These are from Dollarama. Again, they're a little bit bigger than the Dollar Tree blocks. So I've got three different sizes here and I just love it. So if you can find some different sizes of these blocks, they're really handy for crafting. I'm going to use the same gel stain them up on all of the sides, and then set them aside to dry. Using my Cricut Joy, I created this little bloom word with black vinyl, and I just love the little extra swirls that I was able to add onto it. Of course, this will be available on my website as a free printable, and that link is also down in my description box. This little printout is also a Cricut design. However, it is free, so I will be able to share that as well in my description box. I'm using a little round disc that I had just to trace out the circle of this little image that I'd like to recreate. I'm using a fine tip Sharpie marker, and I'm just going to hold the wood disc in place and draw the stitches all the way around. I'm going to recreate the rest of this little printable, just doing freehand and just copying it as I see it there. It's not going to turn out 100%, but it does turn out super cute. So if you're interested in doing something like this, it really doesn't take a lot to do it. You just have to take your time, look at the photo, do one little piece at a time, and if yours turns out a little bit different than the original piece, that's okay. Then it's unique and you can call it your own. This is how a hop works. What you're going to do when you're done with my video is go down to my description box and click on the link where it says hop to the next person. You'll do that after watching every video, and once you get back to mine, you'll know that you're gone full circle and you've seen all of my friends that are in the hop today. Using a small rough brush dipped into some white paint, I'm just going over the top of the flower image just to make it look a little bit more aged and distressed. Now to work a little bit more on the candlestick, it's nice and dry, and what I'm doing is just taking some coarse grit sandpaper and just working it in a few spots to bring out some of that old antique look, scraping off some of the paint. It goes sometimes through just to the black paint and sometimes it goes right through to the glass. But that just adds to the character of the piece. Whenever I'm painting on glass or slick surfaces, I like to put a sealer on top just to make sure that it's not going to peel off. It does affect the flatness of the paint, so be aware of that. This one is a satin finish. I normally like to get flat, but they were out, but I think the satin works just as well. So of course there has to be some dry brushing on that frame. It can't stay just stained brown, although if you were doing this project and you wanted to keep it that way, you could. I'm just going to do some light dry brushing with white all the way around the front and the sides and the back. Now for the assembly. I'm taking some Weld Bond glue, which is my favorite permanent glue to use, and I'm putting a generous amount on the one block because I'll be gluing these together side by side. This glue is workable in about 15 minutes, but there was a tiny little gap in between those blocks, so I'm just using a clamp to hold it together better. Sticking again just with the Weld Bond glue, I've got a generous amount on the top of the candlestick and I've flipped it around so I know I can place it better this way right in the center of the 2 blocks. I'm going to do the same with the glue where I'm going to be placing the frame, a generous amount, and then I'm going to just sit the frame on top and then set this aside to dry. It turned out so pretty. I really, really love this one. I am going to show you how to make your own magnolia leaves. They are so expensive. I've checked on Amazon and different places, and the prices are outrageous. So I grabbed this little bush from the dollar store, and I'm just going to trim off as many leaves as I think I might need. Magnolia leaves are not shaped like this. So because these are fabric leaves, I can go ahead, use my scissors and create the shape of the magnolia leaves that I want. I'm going to cut that tip off so it's not quite so sharp and make them more into an oval shape. Magnolia leaves are sort of an orangey brown underneath, so I decided to use some honey brown acrylic paint that I have. I do have a little bit of talc in here, which makes a bit of a chalk paint, so I did only need to use one coat. You're not really going to see the bottom of these, but I wanted to make them look good anyway. Once the backs of the leaves were dry, it was time to paint the front. Magnolia leaves are a solid color. They don't have any variations in them. So I have a dark green color and it's a little bit lighter than I liked it to be, but I didn't want to add any more black or brown to it because I've done that before and I've just turned it into a mud color. So I'm going to stick with this green. It is a really pretty green color. This is a Dollar Tree wreath. It's part of a 2-pack. And what I did was I cut out the top rings because I'm trying to make a modern look magnolia hoop wreath, but I didn't have a proper hoop wreath and all of the little embroidery hoops that I have are way too small. So what I'm going to do is take some twine and I'm just starting by knotting it on the inside of that little wire there to hold it in place. And I'm going to take the twine and wrap it all the way around the top side of that single wire. So I had a bunch of string that was really easy to just push it through like this. I wrap it around a few times and then just push it together so it's nice and snug. Once I got to the end on the other side, I tied it off again, but then I also reinforced it with some hot glue on this end and on the start end. I don't know about you other crafters out there, but when I'm using these wire wreaths, I really like to have some more of a base to them. So I'm taking some of this nautical rope from the Dollar Tree and I'm going to wind it around the 3 wires at the bottom here. And that's going to just really help my florals and greenery that I want to attach have something to attach to. I started by gluing the end on with hot glue at the bottom, and now I'm just going to do the same thing as I did with the other twine. Wrap it around until I get to the end and then hot glue it in place. I'm also gluing it a little bit as I go just to make sure that it stays in place. So here's the base of my wreath. I think this part turned out really great. Now it's time to start adding my greenery. I'm going to start with the leaves and do a few of them down on the bottom just with some hot glue. And the twine and hot glue are a really good match because everything sticks to it. So this is going to turn out perfect. Last year in the springtime, I lucked out and found some really pretty magnolia flowers at my Dollarama. They look so real. And what I did with this first one is I just tucked it underneath those 2 flowers. And now I've got this other one here. It's a little bit bigger, but you can see how pretty they are. I don't really like the way the magnolia leaves flop around so much, so I do try to tack them down a little bit just so they're more of a closed blossom rather than one that's wide open. I've added the second one facing towards the first one, and now I'm going to add a few more leaves. And I'm just going to keep adding leaves and blossoms until I like the look of it. I end up adding 3 full blossoms and then just a few extra little petals. The wreath is looking really pretty, but I wanted to add a little bit more texture. So I have this little trailing vine with little white flowers. Now I'm removing the little white flowers because I don't want that to interfere with the coloring of the magnolias. So I'm just going to place some of these little branches in between. One thing that is tricky when you're doing little hoop wreaths like this is how are you going to hang it? It's not like you can nail on a traditional hanger. So what I did is I took some more of the jute twine and I wrapped around a little section. Now this was mainly because there was a tiny little bit of metal poking out where it had been snipped off. So I wanted to cover that up to make sure there weren't any sharp edges. But then I also decided then to make this part of the hanger. So I just wrapped the jute twine around to make it double thickness, and then I left a little loop and tied it off on each end. This is a milk or water pitcher that I picked up at the thrift store. It has some beautiful lines to it. I love the handle, love the scalloped edges. For this piece, I'm using Home Decor Folk Art chalk paint in the color White Adirondack. This is a super thick chalk paint. I love it. And I really like to use it on pieces like this that I know I will probably try to sell. I want to make sure that the paint is going to cover really well. For the second coat, I'm going to use the same paint, the same brush, but I'm going to go in an across motion rather than an up and down motion. This is just going to ensure that I have good coverage and it will minimize any brush strokes. I went to my computer and I designed this label. I printed it off on tissue paper. This is white tissue paper that I just taped to regular printer paper, and I'm just going to cut it out as close to the image as I can. Using Mod Podge and a small brush, I'm going to apply a generous amount where I want my label to stick to. Then I'm just going to place my label on. Now you want to make sure that you have it in the right spot. Because it's tissue paper, you won't be able to lift it up and move it. It's going to tear. So you've got to get it on the first shot. But whatever happens to it is okay. If you get some wrinkles, if you get a little tear, it just adds to the vintageness and the character of the piece and makes it look really nice and old. I'm just patting it down with my finger to make sure that it's all adhered, and then I'm going to use Mod Podge again with my small brush and give it a coat on top. If there are any wrinkles or pieces that I think I can smooth down, I'm just using the tip of my brush and a pouncing motion just to kind of push that tissue paper right into the glue and make it not so bumpy. This turns out absolutely amazing. You don't even know that there's tissue paper on it. It looks like the label has been hand painted on. Once the Mod Podge is dry, I also give this a coat of the Rust-Oleum clear finish. My last project for you today is just making a simple wooden crate. I'm using some of these wood shims that I pick up at the Home Depot. You get 40 of them. I think they're around $7, and they cut really nicely with my miter shears. So I'm going to go ahead and trim them down to the size I need. You can make this crate any size you want. I'm using about 6 inches in length. Here are all the pieces I have. 2 for the front of the crate, 5 for the back of the crate. However, I only end up using 4. I have 3 for the bottom, and then the sides are going to be those 2 squares that you can get from the Dollar Tree in a pack of 6. I've marked them off in an angle because I want the crate to be higher in the back and lower in the front. And I'm just using my utility knife to score them, and then they'll be able to snap as well. The 3 shims at the bottom will actually be the bottom, so I am putting the side pieces on the side edges of the shims. I'm going to put the 2 front pieces on next, and I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap in between just so it has the look of a proper crate. The original pieces that I was going to use for the back were too short. I didn't like how it looked. So I decided to create some longer ones. And I'm going to do 2 the same length and then another 2 the same length. I want them shorter at the end and longer in the center. I'm going to use another piece of shim as a brace to make sure that those pieces at the back don't get all wonky. I made the brace piece short enough that I'd be able to just glue the crate right onto the outside pieces of the backing. I gave everything a couple coats of white paint, and now I'm going to take a dry brush, dip it in some black paint, rub off the excess, and then go across it to give it a little bit more of a distressed look. As I was working with the crate, I noticed that these taller pieces are still a little wiggly, so I'm just taking another little piece of shim that I've painted white, and I'm going to glue it near the top of the stakes just so they have more support. I have different shapes of styrofoam balls left over from Christmas, so I'm using them up in my floral arrangements. I'm adding a little bit of reindeer moss to camouflage them, and then I'm going to add some tulips. I've cut the tulips down to be a little shorter because I still want to be able to see that picket fence in the back. And then I'm going to push them into the styrofoam and use a little bit of hot glue to hold them in place. I'm all about adding texture and making things look a little bit more high end. So I'm taking some of this eucalyptus and I'm just going to stick it in various spots just to fill it out a little bit more. Don't forget to go down to my description box and click on the link to the next person to hop to. I hope you enjoyed my videos today. If you did and you're new to my channel, I would love for you to stick around. Hit that subscribe button. Those 2 black arrows will show you exactly where to click. Thank you so much to Heidi Sonbull DIY for her amazing generosity and for letting me participate in this Friend Friday. It was a lot of fun. See you in the next one.